The Prime Minister has arrived in Vietnam. His visit marks 50 years of relations between the two countries. Mr Albanese kick-started his trip by enjoying local fare at a busy Vietnamese restaurant. Our chief news anchor Kieran Gilbert was with the Prime Minister in Hanoi.
So the Prime Minister now in Hanoi. He stopped off in central Hanoi to a very busy district for lunch. This is a place serving pork rolls and banh mi. Through that crowd, Mr Albanese sitting with the packed media in there. He was offered a beer and a pork roll. The locals very happy to see the Prime Minister. You can hear the cheer. Very happy to see him. The roads were blocked off, and sitting down with his tie off and enjoying a bit of the local fare. Incidentally, it's not just about the goodwill of sitting down with the locals and having lunch. Australia provides much of the wheat that the Vietnamese use for their bread rolls and 99% of the barley that goes into their beers.
Barley exports grew to Vietnam by some 75% since 2020. And Vietnam is one of the top 10 consumers of beer in the world. A little fun fact for Kieran Gilbert there.
The first stop was at RMIT, the Melbourne University, which has had a presence in Vietnam for more than 20 years. International education is one of our biggest exports to Vietnam. It's our fifth biggest market for international students. Nearly 30,000 Vietnamese students studying at Australian unis, either here in Vietnam or in Australia, and the Prime Minister wanted to express that support. It was his first commitment as he arrived here in Vietnam.
It is the biggest and most powerful weapon we have against disadvantage. It opens the doors of opportunity. Education lifts us up, not just as individuals, but it also lifts our nations up and our economies as well. And so I am very pleased that we're celebrating the evolution of an education partnership between our nations that began more than 2 decades ago.
So the first day is largely about the economic relations, exports like wheat, barley, higher education. The second day is about the high-level meetings with the Vietnamese leadership. And I asked the Prime Minister a question about the giant northern neighbour to Vietnam and whether or not there are things that the Vietnamese experience can teach Australia.
Vietnam, of course, shares a border with China to its north. We will have discussions, no doubt. We'll touch on that relationship. We'll touch as well on we and Vietnam share a view on the South China Sea, and that the Convention on Law of the Sea needs to be upheld and maintained, that we need to respect nations' sovereignty in the region and indeed throughout the world. And we share that view.
So from Singapore to Hanoi, the Prime Minister now in Vietnam for 2 days to mark the 50 years of diplomatic relations between Australia and Vietnam. Kieran Gilbert, Sky News, Hanoi.